We often think of a mother's love as a sanctuary, a soft place to land. But there is a version of that love that isn't soft. It's a furnace. It's a heat so intense it consumes everything in its path just to keep a single, flickering coal alive. As you listen to the story of Martha and Clara, ask yourself, at what point does the act of saving someone else become the act of losing yourself? The television in the corner was nothing but a dead glass eye. Martha didn't bother turning it on, the screen only reflected a room the world had already forgotten. She sat by the window, watching a single column of dust dance in a sunbeam that had managed to fight its way through the heavy curtains. She was so still her own blood hummed in her ears. On the cot, Clara was a smudge of white, just brittle bones and faded flannel. Her breathing wasn't a sound anymore, it was a ghost moving through the room, a rhythm Martha didn't know how to stop. Martha's life was built on a simple geometry: work hard for a harvest, scrub for a clean floor. But this sickness followed no rules. It didn't care about the miles she walked for herbs or the nights she spent shivering. It only knew how to take. She reached the cot before the word "mother" had even finished echoing. It was a reflex now, a mechanical ritual of care. She lifted a cup of rowan and honey tea, the steam smelling of wet earth and rain. The village healer had handed it to her with a look that said everything his mouth wouldn't. He didn't see a recovery, he only saw the end. "Drink," Martha rasped, her voice as dry as the floorboards. Clara turned her head, her neck a thin, white line. "It tastes like the dirt," she whispered. "Like the shadow under the door." Martha gripped the cup until her knuckles turned white. "It tastes like staying here, Clara. That's the only flavor that matters." Martha sat on the edge of the mattress and closed her eyes. It was a story Clara knew by heart, a loop of folklore they used to kill the silence. "The mountain stood before the sun," Martha began, her voice falling into a low, rhythmic trance. "It cast a shadow over the village until the people forgot what light looked like. They prayed for it to move, but the mountain was deaf. So, a woman climbed to the peak. She didn't cry. She just gathered the mountain into her apron and walked away. She walked until her feet turned to stone, but the sun followed her home." Clara drifted off, her hand falling limp. Martha stood and walked to the hearth. She pulled back the rug and pried up a loose stone. Beneath it sat the iron box, the village's winter grain silver. Everyone trusted her to keep it safe. The choice wasn't a question, it was a weight she had already decided to carry. The journey to town usually took 3 days. Martha did it in 2. She didn't feel the blisters popping in her boots or the ache in her lungs. She only felt the silver pulsing against her hip. There was a jagged, manic kind of joy in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in years. Every step was a betrayal of her neighbors, but it didn't matter. Not when the alternative was watching the light go out in Clara's eyes. The merchant's shop smelled of salt and dried lavender. He was a man with eyes like glass beads. He looked at the silver and then at the small blue vial on the counter. "This is a lot of silver for a little glass," he said. "Is it enough for a life?" Martha stared him down. "It's all I have. It's enough for breath." The ride back was a fever dream. When her horse finally collapsed, Martha didn't stop to mourn it. She stripped her pack and ran. Her lungs burned with the same orange fire she saw on the horizon as she neared the village. The granary was a skeleton of flame and ash. The village's winter hope was rising into the sky as smoke. "Martha!" Thomas, the elder, caught her by the shoulders, his face smeared with soot. "It's gone. All of it. But we have the box. Thank God we have the silver you were guarding." We can still buy grain from the north. Martha looked at the fire, then at the man who had helped build her home. She felt the cold glass of the vial against her leg. Martha looked into Thomas's eyes and saw a fragile, desperate hope. It made her stomach turn. She looked at the faces of her neighbors, people she had known since she was a child, people she was currently destroying. They looked at her like she was their savior. "I don't have it," Martha said. The words were quiet, but they cut through the roar of the fire like a knife. Thomas froze. The hope on his face didn't just fade, it collapsed. "What do you mean?" Martha told her first true lie in 20 years. "The road. Bandits. They took the horse, they took the box. I'm lucky to be standing here." She watched the light go out of him. She hadn't just stolen their food, she had stolen their belief that the world was fair. Inside the cottage, the air was heavy and still. Martha's neighbor, Elena, sat by the cot with her head bowed. "She stayed for you, Martha," Elena whispered. "But she's slipping." Martha didn't answer. She uncorked the blue vial, the scent of poppy filling the room. She pressed it to Clara's lips. "Drink," she commanded. "I brought the sun home. I moved the mountain." The effect was immediate. Within the hour, Clara's breathing smoothed out. Her eyes opened, clear and bright, and she smiled, a radiant, real smile. For hours, they talked of the spring. Martha felt a surge of triumph so intense it felt like a drug. She had beaten the dark. The healer arrived at dawn. He didn't look at Clara first, he looked at the empty blue vial. He picked it up, smelled the cork, and his shoulders slumped. "You went to the man in town," the healer said, his voice flat. "And you bought this." Martha stood tall. "I bought her life. I paid the price." The healer dipped a finger into the glass and tasted the residue. "Poppy and honey, Martha. This is a comfort, not a cure. It gives peace, yes, but it doesn't mend what's broken. It provides a beautiful exit, not a new beginning." The ground beneath Martha's feet seemed to turn to liquid. "But look at her. She's awake." The healer looked at her with pity. "She is comfortable. There is a difference." Clara died at noon. It was a silent cessation, a simple stopping of the clock. Martha was holding her hand when the last bit of warmth left her fingers. She sat with the body for a long time. She thought of the families outside, already packing their bags to flee the coming hunger. She realized then that the woman in her story hadn't moved the mountain to see the light. She had moved it because she couldn't bear to stand in her own shadow. She stood up and walked to Thomas's house. He was sitting on his porch, staring at nothing. "The bandits didn't take the box, Thomas," Martha said. He looked up, his eyes vacant. "I spent it. I spent it on a lie." She spent the rest of her life trying to pay it back. She worked the fields with hands that never stopped shaking. She mended the clothes of the children who had gone hungry because of her. She became a ghost in her own village, a woman who lived on the edge of the woods, always digging, always planting. As the first frost settled on the village years later, Martha stood in her garden, the shovel handle smooth against her palms. She had tried to move a mountain, and in the end, it had buried her. But as she looked down, she saw a single green sprout breaking through the cold earth. A small, stubborn bit of life.